says it's recording on my side.
It does? Okay, well, here we go. Okay, so Daniel, you're a performance footwear designer is your title. And I thought of you first, one of the first, because I don't know anyone who does what you do. Maybe tell me about your background and what you studied and kind of maybe what led you into what you do.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I mean, when I was a kid, I have an older brother who's very creative, very artistic, and that kind of influenced me to try and be creative and artistic. And I liked sports a lot as a kid, and so I was like always designing like uniforms for fictional sports teams. And
On your notebook?
when I, yeah, um, so yeah, I liked sports, and I paid attention to shoes. Like I did a little shoe design for one of my favorite basketball players, and when I was 13, and I sent it to Nike. Um, and anyway, I got older, and I had done some arts classes and like enjoyed them. And people kind of like, hey, like, you have a talent for it, or like, whatever. People that can't draw get excited when someone can. It's like, oh, can you draw me this? Whatever. Um, but my older brother, he's 5 years older than me, 6 years older. He Again, he was doing art stuff, and he found a graphic design class in high school. And so he took that, and he ended up kind of doing this like digital art piece that then got submitted to an art competition, and he won some money from it. And that kind of influenced me to be like, oh, like there's this like computer art thing that I could look into. So I ended up taking a class, and I enjoyed it. And I submitted a like a letterhead. It's like a like a fake business. It was like a recording studio fake thing. I sent it into the same art competition, and was like an honorable mention. And so I was like, oh, like maybe it was the first time I was like, I could get paid to be creative. Um, and so I started going that route, and went into graphic design. Was able to get into kind of the first year, kind of the intro classes for art degrees. And so I did a year of graphic design, but my brother had actually found industrial design, and he was like, "Hey, I really think that you should think about maybe switching to industrial design. I think you'd like it more, and it'd be more fun for you." I was like, "Yeah, maybe." Um, Not really like fully understanding what industrial design was, but I felt good about it, and so I like went for it. And I switched over to industrial design, where I then had to take like a year of classes, and then try and get into the full. It was very stressful, and a lot of hustling and hard work. But I was fortunate to get into the program and be able to graduate. So my degree is industrial design.
What was like the main thing about industrial design that was like, oh, that over graphic design?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to say anything negative about graphic design, but I think
But for you,
for for me, industrial design is a lot about um, form and surface and function. So it's a different kind of thinking and a different kind of problem solving than like visual hierarchy and communication. Like there's in graphic design and industrial design are both trying to communicate things to an audience or a user. The way something looks should tell you something about how you're going to use it or what it's going to do for you. So they're similar in that way, but it's this like graphic design is often more in print or digital, or kind of this like crossover space between industrial and graphic is like user experience, app design, like digital product. Um, but I really like physical. I like the interaction of people using it, and I was always more interested in the soft goods side of industrial design. So that's like bags and footwear. versus like consumer electronics or transportation or housewares or furniture. When you do industrial design, you can kind of go different directions depending on what you're interested in and what kind of internships you do, what kind of projects you do. And I liked soft goods because it's functional. Like a backpack lets you carry things without using your hands. Like that's great.
Mhm.
But the kind of backpack that you use also like says something about you. It says something about your values. It also can help you do things like, you know, make a living or get out into nature. The same with footwear. People like footwear protects and enhances your foot, whether you're in the gym or whether you're running or you're playing soccer, or if you're walking, or if you're, you know, like shoes enable people to do things that hopefully help them find joy um, in their life. And it also says something about like who they are and what they care about, more so than like every smartphone looks the same. No offense to consumer electronics designers, but it's not my like
Right,
passion.
right.
So yeah.
So once you got your degree, what was your next step?
When I was in school, I was interested in soft goods, and there was another student, Aaron Puglisi, who was also interested in bags and stuff. And he was just kind of like, "Hey, do you want to make some bags this summer?" It was between my second and third year, and I was like, "Sure." So I had just taken a sewing class, and so we were like sewing and mocking things up and doing all this prototyping and just coming up with different concepts. And we took one of Aaron's ideas and kind of did a couple of different concepts, and then we went back to school in the fall, and people were like, "Hey, this is really cool, like are you going to do anything with it?" So we ended up deciding to, I mean, having no idea what we were getting into, decided to do a Kickstarter and try and take one of our designs and get it mass produced, because one of the aspects of industrial design is usually you're designing for mass production. Mass
Mhm,
production might only be like 100 units, but it could be like millions of units.
mhm.
Um, and we got really lucky, we were really fortunate. The Kickstarter was successful. And so we kind of like I mean, intentionally, but unintentionally started a backpack company. And so when I finished school, I was
How
doing
old
that with, how
was
old
your
was I?
yeah.
25, 24, 25. I'd have to like look at the years, and yeah, I think it was 24, 25. Um, yeah, and so that was fun, and I was kind of like, you know, I was living in Utah, and so I was like, maybe I could do internships with different companies in Utah while I work for free on my backpack stuff. So I ended up getting an internship with like a consultancy, um, and I was doing a mix of things with them, and then doing bags on the side. And then probably after about a year, I was like, I should probably go get a real job, full-time job. And I interviewed a couple places, and in the end, they were looking for people with more experience than me. Um, but had some good like interviewing experiences. And then I was working with a company in Utah, um, kind of part-time, whatever, and they told me that they wanted to eventually hire me full-time, but then that changed, and so I was like, okay, I gotta, yeah. Anyway, so some fortunate series of events and some networking and connections and things, I was able to get recruited, and do sock design for a big company. And so then I moved to Oregon to do that, and I
A
did
big
that
ath-
for, pardon?
a big athletic company, right?
Yeah, big athletic sportswear company. So yeah, I went there, and was there for 4.5 years, knowing that I wanted to do footwear eventually. So I was kind of like getting real experience, having benefits and a paycheck and all these great things, while building up um, my portfolio of work specific to footwear. So I was doing projects of my own, and then I was also doing stretch projects at work where I did my day job, and then I would also like work with another group within the company on something footwear specific. And then I left that company to get my first footwear position. So I went and joined a startup in Los Angeles. And I was there for about 8 months, but really wanted to have experience outside of the US, and wanted to be doing performance footwear. And some things again came together, and I was able to get a performance footwear design role in Germany. So that's where I am now. And that was about 10 months ago.
It's so exciting. Are you
Yeah,
liking
so
it?
working on really fun product.
What do you do now?
I say I'm a performance footwear designer because that's what I get paid to do. It's for global football, soccer, mostly, as well as some other sports in that kind of space, like
Is it
futsal.
leads or
Yeah,
stuff like that? Okay.
yeah, and all the different bottoms that go on
Or yeah.
cleats. We call them boots when
Oh,
we're outside of America. But yeah, it's super fun. One of the things I like about football is that it's like the one sport where the upper, like the soft part of the shoe, is interacting with the ball. Basketball, that doesn't happen. Tennis, that doesn't happen. Those sports have different like needs in terms of like what the shoe needs to do for you and how you're interacting with the ground and the movements that you do. But global football is fun because like it's this other level of performance where the upper itself is, you know, touching the ball, and it's a huge part of the game. So it's a fun challenge. I've had product be in like the World Cups and Olympics and stuff, which is really fun. The Euro champs, all that. And so, I mean, that's one of the fun parts of a performance product like this, because you know you never know what'll happen, but there's these like iconic moments in sport, and something you worked on can become part of that, like that moment of, you know, like Iceland winning its first World Cup or something, you know, like that. You could um,
and they've got
be
your
part of that.
boots on.
Yeah, or at least some of the players, or you know,
Sure.
somebody
Yeah. Yeah.
scored the winning penalty kick with
Right.
boots that you worked on or something, which is super fun. But I mean, I do other stuff as well. I have like just like fun, more like weird conceptual projects that I do, and like I do them in 3D. I use a VR headset and I model in 3D using Gravity Sketch, and come up with different ideas, and then I just kind of like build them out in 3D and I share them on my Instagram. And they're like a little more just trying to get people to say like, what is that? Like, I've never seen that before.
Pushing a
Or
boundary.
yeah, because I mean, my soapbox is there's a lot of shoes in the world, and if you're just going to do the same thing that everyone else is doing and try and like, you know, take an Air Force One and then put your own logo on it, then like, come on, like, make something new, better, or different. Don't just copy what's already there. But yeah, footwear's a fun space, and but yeah, with industrial design, you can go lots of different places, but footwear was kind of what I always felt drawn to. Um,
Do you think you'll stay in it? Do you think you'll, or would you want to branch out even more?
yeah, I mean, I think it like it's something I worked for a long time, and now I'm just kind of enjoying it. I think as my career uh, evolves, that may change. Like one of the things that I'm wanting to get more involved in, and like some of the projects that I'm giving myself are more around like circularity, like the life and death cycle of a shoe and what happens to it when you're done with it, and how do you get it back into another shoe without it going into a landfill. Um, like if you think about like 3D printed shoes, or even like Crocs, where it's just one material, then it's easier to turn back into a material that you can then make
Use it.
another shoe out of instead of throwing it in the trash. And circular products are a big part of the future.
What do you wish you would have known that you didn't know before you got into all of this, in the industry?
I mean,
You wish you would have had more training in something, or what's a tip that you would give to someone of like, oh, practice more of this. Don't be afraid to explore, or, I'm putting words in your mouth.
I think that, like, there's nothing that I would change in my personal journey because I am where I am now, which is awesome for me. And like I'm enjoying it. And there's a lot of things that have developed me into the person and also the designer that I am because of the journey that I've gone through. If footwear had been something that was just handed to me, because it's a very competitive, difficult industry to get into. And some people, they go to university where there's lots of opportunities for internships and they graduate with 4 or 5 footwear internships, and then they already have connections and they're able to, get a full-time job out of school in footwear. And I didn't have those opportunities in the same way, and had to fill a lot of gaps in my skills and get better. And because when I graduated school, like honestly, like I wasn't a very good designer. Like there's lots of things that I didn't really get. Like
Sure.
it took me a while and it took me a lot of work and a lot of whatever to get there. So I mean, I think the advice is one piece of advice is everything that you do is developing you and teaching you. So I mean, don't feel like effort is wasted, even if you're learning something that you hate doing. It's like, well, now you know that you don't like doing it, and you can focus on something else. So, every experience kind of builds into you, even if they're not like the funnest experiences or whatever. But I think advice-wise is like, if you think you're interested in something, like explore it. Like if you're like, oh, like I think I want to be a shoe designer. It's like, well, start drawing shoes, start dissecting shoes, start trying to make shoes, watch YouTube tutorials, watch documentaries, read books, like just like stuff that I didn't do. Like I wasn't as like attuned to like the history of footwear when I was younger, which is fine. You don't need to know everything. You have plenty of time to learn those things. But I think just like if you think you're interested in any subject, any area, explore it, talk to people who are doing it. Social media really shrinks the communication gap. Like I have people slide into my DMs, my design account
I mean,
DMs,
I did
and
in order to do this.
yeah, they ask me questions, and I'm like, yeah, like here's some advice, or here's um, tutorials to look at, or here's an interview that I did where I talk about my journey. Maybe that'll be helpful for you. And I can kind of try and direct them to, or even like, hey, I'm a student. Can you give me feedback on my portfolio? Like, what do I like? It's not everyone has the time for it or wants to do it, but there are professionals who do and who enjoy it and want to give back.
Last thing, what do you love about your job?
I There's a lot to love about it. I'm not very animated in my emotions
I know.
ever.
Sorry.
So sorry if it's not coming across how much I love what I do. But I think there are things that you don't necessarily think about when you're trying to figure out what you should do. Things that you don't necessarily learn in school. I mean, I would say like there's things that you're good at, there's things that you enjoy, and there's things that you can get paid for. And ideally, you find all three of those.
Mhm.
Sometimes you can only find two of those, right? And sometimes they become a hobby, and sometimes they become a career or a job while you study or whatever. Um, but like one of the things I think sometimes people especially Americans. I'm an American, so I can say this. We overemphasize like titles and pay. It's like, oh, I'm senior whatever, or I'm vice whatever, and I'm making six figures, and I can have a boat and all this stuff. And I'm like, cool, like it's great, but like one of the things I enjoy about being in the sportswear industry is that the people that you work with and the culture of the company are tend to be a lot more like fun, enjoyable, and I don't know if relaxed is the right word, but like laid back. Like, I mean, meetings can get like intense when you're trying to like make a decision on something that impacts big things or whatever. Um, but I've had really great teams. I've had great managers. The benefits of like right now I get to go play soccer one or two times a week during lunch with coworkers. And that's like part of the culture of the company. Um, there's things like in Germany, you get way more vacation days than you do in the US. And so like that's something that is like it's kind of like an intangible in terms of like the company, but then like I don't think you're ever going to have a job where you wake up every day and you're just like, I love today. I love everything that I'm doing because we
Still work.
fluctuate, right?
Yeah.
It's still work, but like I have a job that I think is more consistently fun for me. And then there's also these kinds of things like I've gotten to travel a bunch because we like do factory trips. So, and when I was in socks, I got to go to like Israel and Sri Lanka, which are like, those aren't normal places that you necessarily get to travel for factories, but like, it's one of those things is like, no one's like, hey, you should do design because you get to travel more. And it's like, oh, like it, you know,
It's a perk.
I've been able, yeah, it's a perk
Mhm.
um, that you didn't necessarily know about. And so I think that's one of the things to think about is like, yes, there's like how much money can I make doing this thing, but money doesn't make you happy. Um, and I think the way you feel before work, at work, and after work um, will drive more of like, you know, your fulfillment in life and in your happiness. Like, are you getting to use your strengths at work? Like, are you feeling challenged, or is it something you're good at? Like, those things tend to be, I think, more important. And I would also say it is okay to have a job that you don't love, as long as that job allows you to do the things that you do love. And design, not everybody's cut out for design, and footwear is really competitive. And there's maybe some other thing that you could do where, you know, it's like, I really care about traveling and I have a job that lets me travel. Either the job lets me travel or the demands of the hours of the job gives me the flexibility to travel. So it's like, okay, like, yeah, which I know it's hard when you're young to know all those things about yourself because I didn't know those things when I was 16. um, but just being aware that there's more than titles and how much money you're going to make. Um, and another thing which maybe you've experienced is like just because you have a certain degree or you're doing a certain job, it doesn't mean you have to do that until you die. Like you can reinvent your career. I mean, I've changed product types. I went from bags to socks to shoes. Um, and eventually I want to do education. So it's like there's, you know, you can reinvent yourself, you can go back to school, you can get new certifications, you can do other things that will give you like um, one of the guys on my team, he was in like nutrition and had studied that. And then later he's like, oh, I want to do footwear design. So he like worked as a firefighter so that he could do design school. And now he's a footwear designer. It's like footwear designer, firefighter, nutritionist. Like he's,
There's so
you
many
know,
different paths. Like you don't have to just
yeah,
do a route. But I appreciate you sharing your experience with me
yeah, of
and
course,
a little insight on what you do every day.
of course. Happy to share.